Welcome everyone that has joined us, and welcome Joey. Thank you so much for coming on. We're back this year with our Sketch It Out live episodes, and I'm so glad, everyone that's tuning in, or if you're watching on a later date, thank you so much for tuning in. A couple things. This episode is going to be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, so look out for that. It's going to happen tonight or tomorrow. Please, if you're not speaking, just kindly switch off your mic and your videos for now, and later on when it's question and answer, it'll be more interactive, so you'll be able to speak then. If you have questions, please just hold on till the end and we would be sure to answer all of your questions. We would love to see your sketches. So on Instagram, you can tag us at layersofdesign_. You can go ahead and tag Morpholio. I know I didn't put all of your handles here, but I'm going to have that all up. And of course, hashtag layers of sketches. Connect with us on Instagram, Pinterest, and Twitter. And you can listen to all episodes, including this one, on most streaming platforms. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so on. Okay. So again, we're here for this year's first Sketch It Out episode. And before we actually get started, I just wanted to remind everyone that Design X Community is our first annual event that's going to be held on April 17th and April 18th. So if this is your first time hearing it, please head over to social media or our website to find out more about this event. And of course, we're here with Joey Swerdlin, and we will be talking about drawing, design, and equitable architecture. So welcome, Joey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and honored to be able to have this conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, of course. So before we get started, I want to ask you, before we get into the sketching, I want to ask you, what got you into architecture and design?
So it's an interesting question. It was kind of a happenstance and partly my mom's fault, I think. Or her instigation. When I was applying to college at the very beginning, I had no idea what I wanted to apply for. I didn't really know much about college at all. And my father had gone to college, but my mother didn't. So it was kind of like a bit of a new thing. And I just didn't know what I was going to do. So I applied to one school, got in for actuarial sciences. But I had to, in order to go to that school, I had to leave for a summer program the day after I graduated high school. And so I wasn't really prepared for that. And this was like way late after all the applications were due. So I had no idea what I was going to do. And my mom was like, you like math, you like drawing, maybe you should try out architecture. So I did that. I applied kind of last minute to University at Buffalo. In upstate New York for the architecture program, and did my first semester, really loved it, but also was really overwhelmed by it. And so after that first semester, I actually took a year off from architecture. I got a leave of absence from studio from the chair, and I just was undecided and did a lot of other classes, tried out tons of different intro to philosophy, psychology, took a lot of art classes, got into like some more studying languages, all sorts of different things. And after that year, I realized that I really missed designing and working with my hands. And so I ended up going back to architecture school. And that was, I think now 11 years ago, and I haven't really looked back since. And then after studying in undergrad, I took a couple years off. Worked in different offices and in architecture in different capacities in the US and a little bit in Europe as well. And then I came back, applied to architecture school, and went to MIT for my graduate studies to complete my MArch. And that was 2 years ago that I finished that up, and I've been now working with Group Project and Morpholio since then.
Wow. Okay. Well, So from that download, first of all, the different classes that you helped, the period where you left architecture, did those classes help sort of give you more focus or more exposure, or did it help with your design classes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like all of those classes were very basic introductory things. So I think it was what I was searching for was something specific to hone in on. And each of those classes interested me, but none of them captivated me fully. And so what I think another reason why I ended up going back to architecture school is that I knew that I could apply those different interests and curiosities towards design thinking and towards thinking about architectural space and conception. And so for me, architecture allowed me to maintain all of those interests without having to like completely tunnel vision away from other interests that I might have. So it'll like it's funny in the way that allows you to like deep dive into a specific area of focus, and then you can zoom out and dive into a completely different other thing. So like with group project right now, we're working on this. We're working with Zelie Brown, who's an artist from Alabama, and she has developed this idea to create outhouses for folks in her hometown where it's the housing is very rural, so it's difficult to set up proper plumbing systems. And given the nature of the soil and the hurricane seasons, the price of septic tanks to have like an off-grid system is also prohibitively expensive in relation to the price of housing in the area as well, just because it's a very low wealth area. The government in Alabama has really basically turned a blind eye to this. It's a predominantly Black population in this county, and the leadership has just shown no interest in dealing with this issue. And so what it has ended up causing is that people are just dumping their waste into their lawns, basically, because it's the easiest way to deal with things. And that, of course, has really detrimental health outcomes and impacts. So there is just high cases of hookworm and other illnesses in the community because of that as well. So it has all these ripple effects, right? Anyway, so her idea is to develop this a system, a design for the most beautiful outhouse in the world that these people can enjoy and have a really positive experience of going to the bathroom. And the idea also is hopefully applicable more broadly, but the goal is to kind of be extremely specific and focused on this specific community for this design. And the reason why I'm sharing all of that is just to show how like architecture can bring you into these like very specific deep dives about like never thought I would really be thinking about public health or the like how waste systems work or what soil conditions are like all of these different things that impact architecture as well as like the cultural side of things and the politics that are involved. Architecture allows you to kind of touch on all those things while designing spaces, while thinking about how we experience the built environment too. And so I think that like that is really exciting within working in architecture and thinking about it more broadly.
Definitely. And I agree. I think that's one of the biggest things I love most about architecture and design, because it's so broad, but you can get so specific, and it almost like you can almost find a solution to many problems through design, through architecture. So that's also one of the reasons I'm really passionate about the profession. So before we get really into your, what you're up to right now, I wanted to touch more again about your earlier, when you first started.
Sure.
So I, from a couple of our discussions, you had mentioned you went to Europe to study for some time. So how did that come about? Why did you go? And how did that affect your career? Like, how did it position you?
Yeah. So the reason that I went abroad a couple times to Europe. The first time was in my undergrad. So during this time off, like I mentioned, I started studying German, and I had studied German in high school and middle school actually as well. And my interest in German was that my mother's side of the family comes from Germany. So on both sides, my heritage is that both of my parents were Jewish. On my mother's side, my grandparents fled the Holocaust, and so I've always felt like a certain interest in the German language and culture because that was a part of my family heritage, and so that was the original reason that I studied German and that I ended up going to Germany to study. And the second time that I went to work in Europe actually was because I became really interested. Well, there were a couple of reasons actually too. The first was that I was working with one of my professors, Joyce Huang, and she's a professor at Buffalo and has a practice called Ants of the Prairie that focuses on architecture for animals and for non-human inhabitation. And so I was helping her with a project called Bat Cloud, which are these hanging bat houses. And it was being installed at the Architecture Biennale in Rotterdam. And so I was part of the production team for that. So I was helped to go there and install this project. In addition, there were a couple of other things happening that same summer. And I was really interested in this office in Brussels called Office KGDBS, Kirsten Gears David van Severen. And I still really love the architecture that they make. And I had, it was kind of a long story, but basically I ended up working for the summer at their office as an intern. And then I came back to the US after that. So those two different things. One was like kind of study abroad experience / like reconnecting with my family's history, and the other one was more of a work related experience in Europe. And I think both of those experiences, though, as far as like how they kind of impact how I think and work now, like part of it is that I still feel very connected to my family's history in that regard, as far as the kind of Jewish heritage and the experience of and the kind of pain of the Holocaust. I think still kind of live in my being. It's something that I can't. It's just kind of a part of who I am still, and part of my identity. And the other side of it, like the work side, is like that I do really appreciate Office KGDBS's work, and I think about it a lot. I think when I design as well, and I think that it does influence kind of my aesthetic choices and taste to a certain degree, which are kind of inherent, but also very they're not innocent, I'll say. And so I think that's something that I've been unpacking over the past couple of years too, of like really understanding why it is that we like the things that we like, why we find things beautiful, and really challenging the kind of colonial nature of what beauty is and where beauty lies, because it's such a construction that exists, and it has deeply kind of European, white European connotations, and that's kind of where it was generated. Like a lot of our notions of beauty, at least in the West here, and so that's something I've definitely been unpacking a lot and trying to understand. Like, what is my intuition, but where is my intuition coming from as well? Like to challenge that and to kind of understand it in a more meaningful way.
That's interesting. Okay, so let's get sketching, but of course I'm gonna keep asking you questions.
Yes.
Okay, so today We're talking about drawing, design, and equitable architecture. And Joey, actually, can you explain this slide? Why do why the topic, and why did you choose these 7 items for us to draw?
Yeah, so I like prompts that come in odd numbers usually.
Okay.
That's why we have 7 items. I was going to do 5, but then I decided to throw in a couple more. And as far as the like specifics of the prompt, they are not, I could probably start post-rationalizing why I decided on these things, but really it was just a desire to find something fun and different to draw, hopefully, and I don't know, to see what happens from it. I thought they were kind of like weird, quirky things that could potentially be interpreted in different ways. And some of them are very and maybe mundane, but also things that maybe we overlook and don't think about so much.
Definitely. Okay, well, I don't even know which one to start with. Actually, I'm going to start with number 1. And I will be using the Morpholio app, of course. So,
same.
Nice. Okay, that's a good segue into discussing your role in Morpholio.
Yeah.
So as we sketch, everyone can go ahead and draw all 7 or choose one. Just feel free. So Joey, tell me about, how did you get started in Morpholio?
So I'm also going maybe attempt to do some of these sketches as well.
Yeah, it's hard to draw to sketch and talk, but
it is. It's not. So Morpholio. So when I after I graduated undergrad, I the summer after, I moved to New York because I got an internship at Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York, which is like a gallery, and it's a gallery and like exhibition space in New York. And that focuses obviously on art and architecture. And so during that summer, there were a series of events that the gallery hosted around different exhibitions that were being opened. And one of them was a drawing exhibition.
Okay.
Which brought together, I don't know, like 20 or 30 different architects who submitted drawings about, I think it was called like oppositions, protocols, something. I don't think it was oppositions, it was something else. But anyways, they were just like different ways of interpreting a kind of position within architecture or a stance. So two people actually that were involved in that kind of, I was able to connect with and led to different opportunities. So one of them was happened to be one of the co-founders of Morpholio. And during this time, I was in desperation mode because the internship at Storefront in Art and Architecture was unpaid, which for me meant that I was living off of savings and needed to find a way to make money. Part of that led me to a job, one of my most delicious jobs that I've ever had, which was working as a barista and at a donut shop in New York, which was amazing. And I basically survived off of donuts that summer because that became my primary meal.
Wow.
That and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And very healthy summer that I had. But so basically at this opening that I was there, I was asking pretty much everyone that I met, like, do you have any internship opportunities? Is there anything that you have going on that like you need help with?
Mm-hmm.
I just needed to like find a job. And the one person that I asked was this person that had been a co-founder of Morpholio. And so I just asked him like what opportunities. I actually had heard of the app previously because they did a like a student competition to submit some work that you did from your latest studio. And so I had worked in the app a little bit and I was familiar with it. So we kind of started chatting, and it turned out that they did need a little help. And so that summer I did an internship with Morpholio, and then I left New York, and after then I went back to Buffalo, and that's when I was working with Joyce, as I had mentioned previously.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Europe, and then when I came back to Europe, I came back to New York, and I took a job in the model shop of the now defamed Richard Meyer and
Oh, wow.
Partners. And when I came back, though, also I reconnected with the Morpholio team and started working part-time with them, mostly doing social media and a little bit of other design stuff with the app, and continued doing that then for the next 1, 2, 3, like 3 or 4 years, I think, 3 years, through grad school as well. And then when I finished grad school in the spring of 2019, then I started working full time with Morpholio, and have been doing that ever since. So I'm my role is the community director. So basically, I work on like kind of marketing and brand identity things, as well as managing the social media, doing all of the like liaison to the global community, and then also the app support for the entire community as well. So yeah, it's pretty, like at this point we have a community of over 1.5 million users overall within the app, and across the different apps. And on social media, it's just really exciting to be able to be connected with folks from all over the world who are using
Morpholio.
using Morpholio and sharing tips and starting collaborations with each other, and just to see that kind of network grow is really exciting and fun to see. Yeah.
Nice. And I mean, how do you like it? I mean, you just answered that.
No, I really enjoy it. I mean, I think it's interesting. We have never had office space as a team, so we've always worked remotely. So even when, like before quarantine has taken over the world, COVID, we had been working remotely anyway, so it wasn't too much of a change of pace. We would have weekly meetings together in New York, where we would meet at a pret a manger, like a little deli place, basically. But so those meetings have stopped, but otherwise operations are pretty much as normal, and we're a small team, so it means that there's a lot of independent work. Like we all work pretty independently. We have weekly team meetings to kind of connect on different topics and go over things. And then I work closely with the rest of the team of, I think we're like at 7 people now. And so we're kind of always in touch with each other, working and doing stuff, but also working pretty independently. So it works well for me. My partner is in med school, and so she has a really crazy schedule. And so it allows me to kind of fluctuate my schedule based on when she's going into the hospital and stuff as well. So
Pretty
it's
cool.
nice to have that flexibility in the workspace as well.
Pretty cool. Okay, so now we know about your involvement with Morpholio. Tell us about group project. I'm really intrigued with, you know, what you're up to there. So tell us how that got started and why.
Yeah, so group project started, it kind of evolved out of a few of my classmates at MIT, and my disinterest in the way that we were experiencing architecture school in our grad program. And so we were wanting a way to connect with kind of more realizable, implementable projects, but also projects that dealt with things like politics and social issues that we were seeing and not really knowing how to engage in, and to become involved in architecture school. And so what happened was there was a thesis student in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT was doing her master thesis on the adaptive reuse of prisons.
Okay.
And in her research, she got in touch with this nonprofit out of North Carolina called Growing Change. And they had kind of started to to occupy a decommissioned prison in North Carolina, and were converting it through kind of a clinical psychological program or a psychology program with youth who have experienced some sort of trauma, been involved in the criminal justice system, kind of facing challenges at home. So working with those youth to help flip this decommissioned prison into an agricultural community center. And so they presented their work, and after their presentation, a few of my friends and I went up to them and said, hey, we're really excited about what you're doing. We'd love to be a part of it in some way. And so that kind of kicked off the collaboration between us and them. And so that summer we went down, we worked on some projects together, basically helping them create some design ideas and some visualizations of how the campus could look, and how it could start to transform into this community center from the prison that it still kind of exists as.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so since then, and that was in 2017. So we've kind of maintained the relationship, and mostly in the summers we were kind of continuing to do different collaborations with them of different projects. And basically every year the scope of the projects got smaller and smaller because we were trying to like get something built and do something on the site. And we realized like the building is a long ways off. Like doing a piece of furniture or like a small thing is not quite feasible yet too. So like we finally landed on making building signs for the different buildings on the campus. And because there was already ideas and there was already implementation in some cases of like reusing these buildings towards different purposes. And so the idea of the sign exercise was both kind of navigational, right? To like know what is what, but also to start psychologically rethinking what you call the building. So rather than calling the barrack that was, or the building that was where the barracks were, where the prisoners slept and lived, start calling that the museum building or the gathering hall. And so start to kind of reimagine and rename these things, and in that process start to really do the conversion of what the future of these spaces will be. Was the goal of that. And so we went down, we worked with the youth to make these signs, and kind of took some cues from existing signage in the area. There's like a pretty strong history of making building signs, which is a whole craft in and of itself. Another one of these like deep dives of like learning that sign making is like an entire creative field that people dedicate their lives to. Wow. And the history and like the artistry of it is really amazing, as well as like the technical side of like what type of paint do you use for a sign that's going to be having to withstand the weather and hurricane winds and all these things. So that was kind of a fun deep dive as well. And yeah, so we did that 2 years ago now. And then this past year we worked with Growing Change, as well as many of the other people that we met with and got to know through Growing Change as well, that are really doing interesting work across agriculture, across academics and things in the area of North Carolina where Growing Change is. And so this past year we got a grant from the Architectural League in New York to do a report. Yeah, that was really fortunate, and really happy for that support. And so we put together, I worked with Morgan, one of the partners of Group Project, and we interviewed different people, everyone from like a young Black farmer, an indigenous university student who's just like an undergrad, but is really active in the environmental movement in the area. Folks that are working in academia, a woman who has started this program at University North Carolina at Pembroke to provide food and housing and clothing for students who are facing food insecurity and housing insecurity at the university. And she has this program that she's kind of created and has been developing. So basically being able to be connected to all these different people and hear their story and how they've gone about their work and what motivates them and everything, and get that kind of consolidated into this report, and to see this kind of active network of people who aren't necessarily collaborating together directly, but also still kind of working towards the same goals, kind of the same mission, and sharing a vision of how things could be and how things should be. So it's been cool to be able to kind of get into this this kind of setting in North Carolina as well. And then so that's kind of been the primary focus of group project, is this collaboration with Growing Change. But slowly we've taken on other projects as well. We a couple of years ago submitted a competition to New York City, which was kind of based on some of the thesis work that I had done in my graduate thesis project, which was focused on developing housing. So in my thesis, I was looking at developing housing, shelter, and services for LGBTQ homeless youth. And so we applied some of those logics and ideas towards developing a single-family house proposal on a small lot in New York City for queer chosen families. And so basically in New York City building code law, the terminology for family is limited to kind of biological families. And so if you have, in queer culture, people kind of band together as needed to build support for each other, to provide that familial bond and relation that might not be accessible at home, the hostility that they faced from their biological families. And so right now, the way that building code is set up in New York is that folks that live like that are not able to occupy a single family home together. And so there's certain code restrictions then that are applied as far as like how bathrooms are set up, but even things like the ability to have different types of stairways and railings and all these things are impacted by that. So by changing and tweaking that building code, suddenly you can unlock this different way of living for folks who need that and could benefit from it. And so that was another proposal that we worked on. And then most recently, as I mentioned, is this project with the outhouse. So there hasn't been like a specific focus on things other than I think what unites the projects is finding ways of furthering the notion that architecture is a right for all people rather than a privilege for those who can afford it. And so that's something that's kind of central with all of these projects, is that different notion of who deserves and who kind of qualifies or is able to access architecture and the design services that are provided by architects. And it was kind of flipping the notion of expertise, of like really opening that process to those who occupy the architecture rather than just holding on to that kind of expertise to ourselves, and understanding that building occupants are actually the most expert kind of understanders of their own space to a certain level. Not that architects don't have anything to bring to the table, but that there needs to be dialogue and exchange in that, rather than kind of a master planning top-down way of practicing and kind of handing down the design. So I think all these kind of notions and ideas are floating around under the surface, and have led us towards working on these different projects that we've been taking on.
Well, that's beautiful. First of all, I really love, the ideas that you guys have over at Group Project. And honestly, that's one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, the main reason I got into architecture. It was literally to help people that were not that weren't given the privilege, I guess, they weren't seen as almost like worthy of good design.
Right.
So, I mean, my childhood dream, I literally remember always driving through the streets and seeing homeless people experiencing homelessness. And I would always like ask my parents, why doesn't anyone care? How can they get back up on their feet?
Right.
So in my head, I literally like drew up this whole community in my head of how, I'll just get people off the streets, put them in good housing. And since nobody wants anything to do with them in their own community, they have good hospitals, good schools, good jobs, just to be able to get back on their feet and move on with their lives. So that's honestly why I got into architecture. And just like you said, going through architecture school, there's this like specific path, or there's this pattern, that they teach you. And I mean, we have like a whole design, 1 or 2 design semesters just dedicated to designing high rises. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I really don't want to design a high rise, but you have to design a high rise. But I have no interest in, high rises. So it's interesting too that you mentioned you noticing that sort of like almost like a hole in, in your education as well. So I wanted to ask you, do you think it's important that, or do you think it would really benefit younger architects, younger designers in school if they're exposed to dealing with social issues through architecture and design? Do you think that's something that should be embedded in the program?
I do, yeah. I think it's really important. I think the challenge of it though as well, and I think this goes with anything, is that it's super important within doing that in architecture school or in any practice really, is to be hyper self-reflective in that, and kind of in your positioning, especially in relation to kind of identifying projects. I think that's where it comes more so than like the kind of taking on, and to ensure that that there are, first of all, that there are partners in whatever community that you are kind of seeking to work in, that are either leading or kind of generating the conversation, and the kind of idea of the project, and that the dialogue is really present throughout the entire process of what is happening, to not get away, to get lost in the project, or to thinking that you're actually like solving a problem in that sense either. Because I think architecture often like when I see studio projects that attempt to kind of take on social issues, or like it's always through this like mentality of problem solving. And I think that is a huge downfall to those projects as well, because I think that isn't necessarily how things should be conceived of, or that it's a very productive way of thinking about the challenges that people are facing in their daily lives. And not that design doesn't have a role in that, but I think being wary of kind of solution-driven ways of thinking about projects is really important, to kind of be cautious of those things, but also not to let that cautiousness stifle your creativity or your kind of process as well. So it's a delicate balance, I think, and it's something that I am still working through, and I'm not totally like settled on a position. So like I do believe that that social issues should be taken on in the design studio, but I think it's also important that it's like not a purely design
For
generative.
problem solving.
There is a lot of dialogue that happens, that there's a lot of research that happens in relation to that.
Wow, yes, I actually really love that answer. The, thinking of design not just as problem solving, but really involving. I know you mentioned this earlier as well, having that dialogue with your clients, really being involved in the community. Because, like you said, it's really about them and not about the architects. But we are taught like almost the other way around. How's your sketching going?
My sketching, I have not. I've written the prompt and I have done nothing with it yet.
I've actually done like 3 sketches already.
Oh, have you?
Yes, I mean they're not the prettiest, but
You want to show?
I got it done. I'll show in a little bit. So I wanted us to talk about designing for fun. So
Cool.
what did you mean by that?
Where did I say that? I'm curious.
In one of our conversations.
Okay, cool. Well, I think it goes a few ways. I think my goal is always to make the process of designing a fun one. And I think like the main way of doing that is by making it a collaborative process, and again, like one that includes dialogue, because I know when I sit in a room and by myself and try to design, it's a very arduous, self-consuming, self-deprecating process, and so that's not fun. So for me, any sort of engagement with another person makes it more fun. So I think that's one side of it. And then I think the other thing too is I guess infusing designs with funness, that things aren't taken too seriously, and that there's always some sort of delight or joy that comes from a project, and something that is curious or strange or odd is one way that I kind of like to do that within things that I design.
Mm-hmm.
Like finding quirkiness or kind of strangeness in something is fun, for me at least. I don't know if it's fun for everyone, but that's a way that I like to think about things, and it's also like a way of, I think, challenging norms or traditions, as well as like subverting things that are very common or known, and flipping them upside down kind of, and yeah, to make you think about the things that we take for granted, I think is part of that, which for me is fun. I don't know if that's fun for everyone.
I mean, I do like what you said about, not to take ourselves too seriously, honestly. I also notice when I get down to designing, especially when it comes to this competition, I always tend to be so serious with myself sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I have to get this done right now. It has to be this way. It has to be exactly how it was in my head. And most of the time it's like the 3rd iteration or the 4th iteration that happens to be the one that I end up liking.
Exactly.
So just keeping that in mind when designing is important. So what have been some defining moments in your career?
Interesting. Not something I reflect on that much, I guess. I guess like I think it's probably things that I've discussed already. So like the decision to leave architecture, the decision to come. Yeah, those are big ones as far as like defining. I think outside of that, I feel like the election of Donald Trump was definitely like a big. There was definitely a shift that I saw within the profession, at least. So I started school in the fall of 2015, which was like the fall. That earlier that summer is when he had declared his run for presidency. And so there was like a whole year of election cycle happening while we were in our first year of architecture school. And it was really interesting. So the first semester, actually, so that fall of 2015, a couple of friends of mine and I put together we had a class called Precedents of Critical Practice, I think it was called. And basically it was just like an introductory theory class about architecture theory from the 60s, 70s to present day. And basically, like, my friends and I were just kind of had looked through our syllabus and the things that we were being taught, and they were all white men. They were all of a certain kind of class and mindset, and we were really disturbed by that. And so we did our final project for that class about race and architecture, and we looked at the history of kind of resistance and activism within architecture schools, especially looking like from like 69 onward, and beginning in the civil rights movements in the 50s, 60s. And so we wrote a few essays. We put together this timeline that was looking at cultural events, governmental events, architecture events, and publications that were all kind of happening at the same time, to kind of suss out this history of how politics impacted architectural development, because we hadn't really come upon many resources that were discussing that actively. And in addition to that, we also conducted a series of like kind of off the record interviews with young architects who had just recently published books. And these were people that weren't necessarily, their work, some of them had something to do with politics loosely. Many of them were kind of, just doing formal work or whatever other non like explicitly related to politics work. And we asked them about the politics of their work, what that meant for them, like what their connection was to that world. And for the most part, people were like, oh, like, we don't really think about that. It's not something that concerns us. Like, it's just like.
Interesting.
And it's funny now, like, Trump gets elected, everything happens obviously over the past 4 years. And those same people have not even necessarily that their like practices have changed towards being more political, but suddenly, like, I don't think we would have heard the same answers as we did at that time. Now to say like, not something I think about, doesn't matter in my work.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. So I think there's definitely, like, I think that is a shift for our whole discipline. I'm concerned now that that Biden has been elected, that there's this like return to the wonderful world of the Obama years, right? Where like we're post-racial, we're doing good again. We aren't building a border wall anymore, so we're like right. And so that concerns me again, especially within architecture. It concerns me that people become complacent again in the way that they stop caring about the political nature of their work, even if it isn't explicitly political, and like not allowing people to claim or political neutrality in the work that they create. So that's not like a defining moment in my career specifically, broad cultural thing, but it definitely impacted, I think, the way that I think about things and how I practice as well.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. And honestly, you even bringing up the politics in architecture and how it concerns you. I never thought about that, because I feel like I'm still on the joy of not having Trump in office. But I never even really thought about the side where things could go back, people could literally go back into their boxes and start pretending again like they're not real issues that Trump made clearly, like blatantly obvious, you know, that even as architects, honestly, and that's one thing that really bothered me, right? That I feel like a lot of architects are very complacent, like you said, like they decide to take the, what was it that I always say? I mean, they just take the middle ground. Like they don't really care about anything. They're just like, this could happen. We don't care as long as we have a client, as long as we have, you know, the money coming in, the client. And I always wonder, like, why is it that that's from the history? I wonder what happened right throughout history that architects sort of became like in the backseat of all of the major events happening, because we literally shape our built environments. Like because of us, you know, a lot of our cities were born. So it's like, when did we become so, you know, we took the backseat and just let everything happen, just let our clients do whatever they want, you know? So that topic is, it's a really interesting topic to me, and also of course frustrating, because I'm in the profession and just seeing some of my colleagues even now just like, yeah, we don't really care, just pay us and we're okay. And I'm just going like, how can you not care, right? How can you be okay with how our cities are going? And even like last year, I really decided to focus on my passion, which is a lot around social impact design. And the one thing I get from people is like, you're never going to make money that way, or how can you make money that way, or that's ridiculous. How about you make money first and then care about this? But I'm like, no, how about we make money as we care about it? You know, there should be money in doing good too. But
Right.
I could go on for about this topic for a long time. We're actually coming up to our hour. Wow. So before
Great.
we start taking questions and seeing sketches, what is one key advice you would give to young designers and architects that are just starting out or thinking of, you know, being in the career?
So interesting. I think I don't have any like grand words of wisdom, I don't think, but I guess I would recommend kind of finding in your process of figuring out what design is and how you like to design, really also like looking internally to see what your motivators are and what your what gives you momentum in designing, why you want to think about it, and to not lose your kind of personal identity in the things that you create, and to kind of emphasize that that unique identity that you bring to architecture into your design process. Yeah, I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is like to exercise designing just like you would with if you're an athlete or something, that you exercise and practice. It's the same thing with design and architecture. The more you do, the better you'll get at it, and the more natural and more fluid it will come. And have fun.
For sure. Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So let's see sketches. I'm going to show mine. I actually sketched 3 things. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second.
Cool.
So I sketched number 1 and number 4. So the first one was drawing a building with 7 lines.
Okay.
Oh.
Let's do. Oh wait. Oh, your screen keeps.
Yeah, my background is.
Your background. Oh, there we go. Ah, nice.
That was the first one. Then I was like, okay, maybe I could get more creative with that one. So this is what I did for the second building.
Fun. Nice.
And then the third one, number 4, was I think it was about drawing people living together. It's an elevation. I did in COVID times.
The distance.
Yeah. Okay, so those were my 4. Does anyone in the audience, would anyone like to share theirs?
I want to see a pool building if anyone's done that. That's what I'm trying to sketch right now.
Oh, hi, Samita.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. You're on mute. Yes.
Yeah, 1 second. 1 second. I want to. Can you see my sketch?
Oh, nice.
That's my sketch. It's my childhood room.
Oh,
Here's my
amazing.
bed. And that is my master bedroom, my mother's room. This is my room. And there's a dining room over here. And there's a setback area which has window opening from the side.
Very nice. I love how detailed you got with the labels and everything.
Fun.
Thank you
Amazing.
so much.
It looks like a room.
So I'm an architect. I have done architecture. And then I have done masters in landscape architecture. And now I'm practicing. I think I have 3.5 years of experience. I have not practiced architecture, core architecture, but I have been practicing landscape architecture for 3.5 years.
Wow, very nice. And do you enjoy landscape architecture?
I love designing, whether it's jewelry designing, building designing, or a landscape design. So I love designing, basically.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being a part of this session today.
Thank you so much.
For
I'm
sure.
obliged.
I love seeing that.
Yes. Oops. Okay. Terry. Terry is an amazing sketcher. Okay. So that's why I'm like, Terry.
I'm commuting, so I didn't sketch today.
No problem, but thank you for
next time.
Thank you for joining.
Of course.
Yeah, Terry's sketches are gorgeous. She was on a few episodes back, and what was our topic again? Wow.
I think educating the young professionals or something.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Nice.
And the building she chose was actually pretty hard, but there was the Ribbon Chapel.
Oh, that building is cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. It was a challenge to sketch, but I had a lot of fun doing that. Okay, well, do you have your sketch to show us?
I have I'm trying to do something. I don't know what's happening here, but
No problem. In the meantime, we can start taking questions actually.
Sure. Here's my building as a pool that I'm starting to work on.
Nice. Oh, that's interesting. I couldn't figure out how to do that.
There's just things in the pool. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is it, but it's something. And then this is my building with 7 lines.
Oh, cool. Okay. Okay. I see what you did there with that one line.
Crazy.
Okay, so if anyone has questions.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, let me see if any questions have come in. If not, that's fine. Okay. Oh, we're back to this slide. Well, if there are no questions, before we wrap it up, just again, Design X Community is coming up and it's going to be an amazing event. It's a 3-part event. The first part is a design competition. So this whole event is focusing on how we can redesign, rethink our public spaces, you know, really focusing on the people experiencing homelessness. So that's what this whole event is about, is how can we make our public spaces more thoughtful. So the first part, like I said, is the design competition. The second part is the virtual design seminar, where we're going to share the designs, the winning designs, and we're going to have some speakers talk to us. And the last part is on April 18th, and it's called Thoughtful Kit Outreach. So from the funds, 50% of the funds from this event is going to go directly to supporting the people experiencing homelessness. And we are going to be going out and handing out thoughtful kits, so kits with necessities for the people out there. So, please head over to layersofdesign.online to read more about it, and hopefully you can be a part of it.
Sweet.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming on today and for being a part of this session. And most especially, thank you to Joey for sharing so much with us today about your experience and, just your ideas. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was really, it's great to think about some of these things and talk about it. It's not something I necessarily do every day. So it's nice, reflective.
For sure. Well, have a great Sunday, everyone.